Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Sunday Social Podcast. My name is Derek.
And I'm Jonathan.
And hey, Jonathan, I want to start this episode off with a question. Mm-hmm. Have you ever had an idea that you thought was the next Apple? And you approach your pastor and you said, hey, pastor, this is the next idea. We're going to go viral with this.
Yeah.
And your pastor just is not down with it. Have you ever had that before?
Oh, yeah. So many times. I worked for my dad. My dad was the pastor. For the majority of the time, I worked at a church.
That's interesting.
And maybe because I was his son, I feel like I had...
He was so easy to like shut him down?
I feel like I was braver with my ideas maybe.
That makes
because
sense.
I was like, what's he going to do? Like fire me from being his son? Like... we do have a friend who was fired by his dad, and I was maybe almost fired by my dad a couple of times, but not because it was like a dumb idea. It was because I was like, insubordinate or whatever. But but like I think I came up with some like pretty crazy ideas. This was also in the era of like creativity is everything for the church, which I feel like is like more accepted now. But it was kind of like that was pushing the envelope. Like that was that was the thing. Like creativity is how we're going to reach the world. And so I was always trying to push like hardcore creativity. And my dad, who was 30 years older than me, was like trying to relate to these millennial ideas, which were the thing at the time. And it was tough.
Were you like early 20s or what was it?
Yeah, early 20s. So right out of college, I started working at the church in college.
Okay.
Graduated and then came on full time and just did like everything. That was probably like creative director role. I was like worship leader in charge of the tech, graphic design, social media, website, like a lot of things.
So you were in the thick of it.
I was very much in the thick of it. We were probably like when I came on staff, we were maybe like 300 people. So like just able to kind of support, an extra staff member.
Yeah.
And then the church was growing at that time pretty rapidly. And I was a big part of like trying to bring the youth to the church at that time.
Yeah. Do you remember any like specific ideas?
Yeah. So there were a lot of good ideas I had.
Okay.
And a lot of bad ideas I had.
Okay.
Some of the good ideas didn't get through. Some of the bad ideas did get through and shouldn't have. I remember one. So I was like pushing for this really hard because I think we were doing a series on like sexual purity or something, right? And I was like, Dad, we got to go with Victoria's Secrets as the topic. And I was imagining like, like a naked ankle on a runway, like in the postcard or whatever. And I was like, dude, this is going to be amazing. It's going to get so much attention. I've never seen this anywhere. Like we got to do it, right? He's like,
that's
no,
kind of genius.
It's kind of genius.
Yeah.
Victoria's Secrets. We would not do it. My dad was like, no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. I was like, Dad, come on. And then it's funny because like a year or two later, a church in town did that series, but they did it like too much. Like they had like shirtless dudes in like wings, like walking during the service. Serious. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't want to go that far. Like I was like wanting to push the envelope, but they destroyed the envelope. But that was one of those that I was like, and I'm glad. I'm thinking back on it, like that wasn't probably a good idea for our church because my dad's not like an edgy dude. Like he's not like, he was, in his 50s or whatever. And I was trying to get him to do this thing that I saw, this kind of be this sort of thing that I saw somewhere else. Like, I mean, that right now that'd be like a Mike Todd type thing, right? Like Transformation Church would do that type of thing. That's that kind of vibe. And I was almost trying to make my dad, my pastor, be that way. And that was not a great idea because
like Ed Young.
Yeah, trying to be like an Ed Young, and like he's not that, and I'm grateful for that. Like that's what he brought was like real like scriptural spiritual depth. Not saying that Mike Todd or Ed Young don't have spiritual depth, right? But like that was what he brought with his sermons, right? Like that was what, and he's really good at that. Like I feel like to this day have things that I've learned from him that like I haven't heard anywhere else, and it's like foundational in my theology that like a lot of people don't have. So yeah, that was one that I am glad didn't go through, but I was like, this is where it's at.
I remember, I wasn't a part of this, like when I was part of this church, I wasn't on staff yet, but they did a series like that. It reminds me of that. It's called The Naked Truth. And they had like dolls that were like naked in a bed. And that was like the bumper. It was I'm like, whoever came up with that idea, I don't know what happened to their job, but like somehow it went through.
The church you were at was a little bit more edgy like that, right? Like it was it's in a cool part of town, a larger city, San Antonio. Trying to reach younger people that maybe are far from God.
Versus yours, it's like
we were not like a seeker friendly church. Not that your church was seeker friendly, but like that was kind of the goal, is like trying to reach people that are not connected with Jesus, right?
Yeah.
We were largely connecting more, like people were getting saved, but it was more like we were connecting with the people that were already believers and like wanting to, really dig in with their faith, right? So yeah, I don't know. That wouldn't have worked for us either.
So okay, if you were to present, like again, if we reenacted this moment and you're like trying to present, if it's this idea or an idea that you're tied to, in your head, are there certain things that you're trying to go into the conversation with that you're trying to do? Or I don't know, how would you approach that if you feel strongly about an idea? Because I feel like a lot of people watching probably have gone through that, where it's like if you're running social media or you're a designer or whatever, you're creating something and you're like, man, I really feel like this is where our church should be going creatively. But some pastors, because they're pastors and they're not really tapped in like that, they're maybe not on board right away.
Yeah, and I think I was able to establish more trust with my dad, which was obviously a lot easier. But actually, or some people might experience it more difficult, right? But like, I feel like later on, I got some ideas through that probably we shouldn't have gotten through because I'd established so much trust. But one of the things that I started doing, realizing, okay, I'm not going to get any of my ideas through. And like, obviously the goal is not to get your ideas through, right? Like the goal is to like unify, get the vision going forth. And that was part of the shift I made, was like, I started asking questions like, Dad, what are we trying to accomplish in this series? Like, why are we doing this series in the first place? So like a sexual purity one, like his goal was not to like scandalize the community and get everyone to come into our church, right? Like that was not the goal of it. That was my goal. They say like, when there's no vision, everyone comes up with their own vision, right?
Right.
And so there was no vision for that series. And, my dad was, I'd say most leaders are visionary, but they don't know necessarily how to communicate their vision with people. Like they have a vision.
Right.
They just don't know how to tell other people what that is. And so what I had to learn to do is get really good at asking questions to get to what his vision was.
That's good, yeah.
And so what I would do is, for all the series that I was pitching, all the ideas that I would start pitching, is I would say, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? Like, is there, like, what are we wanting people to walk away with? Like, what's your home run for this series? Like, the people are, getting baptized, or the people are like getting saved, or so kind of what's the end result? And then, through what you're going to be teaching about, what's kind of our pathway to get there? And then where's the starting point? Where are people now? And then where do we want to get them?
That's good.
And so how can we reach people where they are right now? So in that situation, I found out that it was really just trying to help, guys that were struggling with purity. So the idea was there was already like a desire. So like we didn't need to inflame their lusts by making them think that they were looking at Victoria's Secret catalog. Instead, we wanted to like talk about like the value of family, like, having a marriage that's pure, having like, so I would have changed what I pitched in the first place if I'd known what my dad was trying to accomplish. And I think that's a big deal. It's like one of the best things you can do. And because I started asking those questions and then delivering things that my dad was like, oh yeah, we can work with that, then I was able to get trust for risky ideas later on.
That's good.
But it's hard. It took a while to get there, but the more I was showing him that I was consistently like trying to deliver on what his vision was, it got easier and easier.
Yeah, I think that approach is super smart, because you're doing a lot of the work on the front end to make sure that you're not having to do more work on the back end.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I would do too, is I would ask questions. And I think the type of questions you ask are really important. Like at first, and I made this mistake of asking like because I was designing the series, asking like designer specific questions, but why would my pastor know about color schemes or color palettes, or, it's like, don't ask that. I love how your questions are more geared towards the vision of the series.
Thinking like what's my pastor wanting to accomplish?
What's the purpose of it? Why are we going through this? Maybe it's something the pastor is sensing the congregation is going through in the moment, so they want to touch on that. And sometimes as creatives, at least from my perspective, we want to get so in the weeds of like stuff, and then we feel so boxed in because we're like, well, my pastor wanted this color palette. Well, you're the one who asked him, what colors do you want? It's like you put yourself in your own box. But yeah, I think having questions, a list out every series, you kind of go into a creative meeting with that. and you check those things off, I think it'll lead to less work on the back end, or at least less revisions, because you kind of have a sense of like, okay, this is where we're trying to go.
Yeah, and there's this thing that happens whenever you're fighting for an idea, that like every time you fight your pastor, you're eroding a little bit of that trust. And if you win, you've already eroded trust, and then you better be sure that that succeeds.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you've lost all that trust and have not regained it back. If it succeeds, you regain the trust back. Whereas instead, if you build the trust on the front end, then something fails and you go back to maybe, zero, not negative. You're not in the negative. And I think so many times we're trying to operate from the negative. You're like, man, my pastor doesn't want to do anything that I want to do. And it's because you've been negative this whole time. And like, you don't remember your failures, but he does, because he feels like an idiot whenever that idea that you pushed on him didn't work out. Like, I think about one thing that like totally eroded an idea that, again, I got through, but we shouldn't have done. And I think it was one of those, like, he was bought into it because he's like, okay, let's do it. So like, we were trying to make the shift of like every Sunday being something like special, right? Like, it's not just another Sunday. And it was like the idea that like, if someone comes for the first time, they're like, dude, that was awesome. But he also wanted to do this biblical survey. It was like a summary of the Bible. So it was like in 3 parts, summarizing the Old Testament and the New Testament. And I was like, dude, that's so boring. Like, people are going to come here like, so what, right? Like, obviously it's very valuable if you want to study the Bible, right? Like, there's huge value in that. But I was like, we shouldn't be doing that on Sunday morning. Sunday mornings where people maybe who are like nominally part of the church come in. So inherently, the series didn't match up with what our goals were anyways. But then I pitched this idea. I'm like, okay, well, what if we call it the history of the world, and we make it like this, like, part teaching, part Monty Python sketch thing, where like between each segment of the Bible that you're going to be teaching, we like have a skit that like illustrates it, but it's something funny and ridiculous and like kind of Monty Python-ish, like, like puns and like really bad humor intentionally. And so like we had my dad walk out in a tuxedo, and we had like spotlights and we had like music in between, and we had like a host that was like speaking in a British accent. He wasn't British. And we did all this stuff and like, set things on fire, and like gave everyone like eggs to throw. Cause we were talking about like the exile of the Israelites. And so we're like, oh, let's do eggs aisle. Like, where's the eggs aisle? And then like everyone threw eggs it was dumb, right? It was really
literally
stupid.
threw eggs?
We threw eggs.
That's crazy.
So many dumb ideas. Like, they were so bad. And nobody remembered the series at all. They remembered all of the skits in between, but they don't remember the series. But that was one of those, like, because my dad was like, let's try it. That'll be fun. Like, he's got similar humor to me. Like, so that one didn't erode my trust too much, but I'm like, I shouldn't have probably... Like, we should have thought a little bit deeper, like, should we be doing this series in the first place on a Sunday morning? And the answer was probably no. And so I was fighting for the wrong thing is my problem.
It wasn't excellent.
It wasn't excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've run into, like, times where I'm tied. I think we get so tied to our ideas. That's what's hard, right? And you, even though we say we're not biased, we are biased to our own ideas. Bit of an ego, honestly. Yeah. And it's like... I think there are moments where we kind of lose sight, like you said, of what we're really trying to accomplish, because we're so tied on like, I want my idea to succeed.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that would happen when I would like create series designs for sermons, but then also like creating merch for the church, just because I felt like I was like kind of like tapped into that stuff. I felt like I knew better.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can go into that. Like I remember one time I was pitching something, or it was merch, and my pastor, I mean, he didn't know better, but he then shows the whole staff like, hey, what do y'all think? And I'm like, oh no, like now I got not just one opinion, I got 12 opinions. I got a green light now that I'm like trying to like convince and stuff. And then now it's like this thing where we get so tied to our thing. People are saying comments and you're like, man, you don't agree with it. And it's like, oh man. But what I would try to do sometimes is create things that I knew I wanted to push the box with, but then also stuff I knew my pastor would like. So there's like a balance of like, hey, I know this is typically how we would go in this direction, but I've noticed that this is kind of like where, brands are going or things are headed in this way as far as creativity. So And I always try to show them real world examples of like this brand's doing this
Yeah.
or that's doing that, and give them like social proof of like, I'm not just coming up with some crazy idea.
Yeah.
This is what I'm seeing and where I'm noticing either other churches are going or other industries are going. And so, and then one thing I would do too is get other people to help me buy into it.
Yeah.
So other creators on the team, like they
You
would
almost have like a pre-meeting.
yeah,
you're
like vouch for it. Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, no, for sure. Like that's that or whatever. And so those are some things that I would try and sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't.
It's interesting though, because you creating something that you knew they would like, that your pastor would like, was establishing trust in the beginning.
Yeah.
So it's like your pastor's like, oh, he gets it.
Yeah.
And because he gets it, but he thinks that this other idea might work better, maybe I should listen to him. Which is really smart, because I think a lot of times we like, I've heard other people will like they'll put the like the design they want, and then they'll put like subpar ones and like phone those in. And then what happens is like, they don't like any of them. And then there's no trust, because like you totally missed the mark. You didn't even give me what I wanted at all remotely. And then of course, they'll choose your design maybe, but next time they have like, you've eroded your trust.
Yeah.
And I think that's so smart. You built on trust, and then sometimes you got your idea through and sometimes you didn't, but you delivered exactly what your pastor wanted, which was really smart.
Yeah. Yeah. Trust is huge. Trust is huge, and it's huge.
It's huge. One time we were trying to update our sign, and I think one of my problems as a creative is I think very emotionally, and I don't know how to convey that to people. So like, we were designing a new sign for our church. It was so cool because a drunk driver plowed through our sign, took off a portion of our building. And so like insurance was like, yeah, build a new sign. Like, right. It's like, we didn't have money for this, but we have to get a new sign. So we're like, let's put some money into it. Everyone was fine. So I'm not saying it's great that drunk drivers, nobody died,
There you go.
but someone might've lost their license. But, and so I was like, I want a fountain in our sign. Like, it wasn't like it was like on a large street, and it was a smaller building, but I'm like, I need moving water. And I was like trying to like express the idea that like, just, there's life in it. Like everyone's doing the LED marquee signs at that time. And that's what my dad was like really trying to push for. And I'm like, no, but like, I just want to show that there's like life happening here and like movement, but like actual real movement in a world of digital. It was hard to explain that. You get it, right?
Very,
like you
very abstract.
Very
kinda.
abstract. And I did get the idea through, again, because I established trust, but it was really hard to explain the idea that I want there to feel like there's life when people are driving by our building. And that portrayed that more than just like a static sign, right? I was able to get it through, and it really did. So the problem was like, we would constantly have fountain issues where like, if it was froze outside, the fountains would be like shooting up everywhere because there was like high pressure, or like, there was one day like a homeless person bathing in our fountain, which was like a really bad idea because like the chemicals were intense to keep it from getting algae. So like he might have had skin conditions from that. Like just the things that like, yes. And so like, I think part of it is maybe what I should have done is counted the cost, like researched what's the upkeep for fountains. Again, I got my idea through, but thinking back on it, I might have reevaluated that and been like, man, we gave ourselves like a really troublesome sign that was maybe more work than it was worth. I didn't have to maintain it, so it was fine. Like, we had a maintenance person, but poor Ernie was like constantly trying to figure out, like half his day was trying to fix this fountain. Like,
Shout out to Ernie, man.
Ernie, man, sorry, bro.
Ernie was earning that paycheck.
Earning that paycheck.
That's for sure. But yeah, like you said, count the cost. Like,
Yeah.
man, we get so tied and we don't realize the repercussions of what this idea could bring, because we just wanted to see it succeed, and it did succeed. But you didn't know it. You didn't realize when winter was coming that the water would freeze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Corpus Christi, Texas. It rarely froze, but that one time it did. It was like wild. It was fun. It was like shooting out everywhere. And
did anybody
insane.
get the idea like when they saw it?
oh yeah, people were like, dude,
they
the
loved
sign. They loved the sign.
Oh,
It was.
okay.
I mean, it worked out, but it was also a frustration for our poor
Well, that's
maintenance
good.
guy.
Yeah, at least people understood it.
Dude, the sign looked phenomenal.
Is it still there, or
I don't know. I need to drive by and see. We could Google Street View it.
that would be cool?
I'm gonna look up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it just comes down to understanding. It's like finding that balance. It's like you're trying to figure out the language barrier almost between you and your pastor, or you and your leader, whoever that is, and speak their language in a way that allows you to feel like you're inputting ideas, but also they're understanding how you're trying to portray those. Because I think it's like a language barrier of like,
Yeah.
no, I'm trying to get you to understand this is what we're trying to do, and some people may not understand it. So it's literally figuring out ways to own what it is that you're trying to do, and ask yourself, if I was in their position, how would I want somebody to approach me with that?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it is about trust, and they're trusting you as the expert of your field to know what you're doing, but also as the expert of knowing your church.
Yeah.
Because it is that we can't, small church down the road can't do what Transformation's doing or Elevation's doing, because it's not the same context.
They shouldn't.
They shouldn't. Yeah. It should be totally different. So creativity can look different in other areas, but that's why I started the episode asking like how old you were, because I feel like people, when we're in our young 20s, we think we know, and like, oh, this is gonna get us, to the next elevation status. But it's like, is that even really the goal though?
Yeah.
It's not.
Well, and I think looking back on it now, what I would have done. Again, I got my idea through, so it was a success, right? But I think what I would have done instead is, instead of trying to say like, oh, it's just gonna feel whatever, I would have probably crafted a story. So I'd be like, listen, imagine, and I would probably pick someone in our congregation that my dad knew and be like, imagine Katie driving up to our church, and she's been to a lot of churches before, and she's feel like they're kind of irrelevant. They're kind of like, they're missing like a life, like a community element. And that's what she's feeling driving into our church. And I would like for our sign to be able to communicate life and vibrancy. And so now I'm telling a story of how good. Katie is from before and after encountering our sign, as stupid as that is, but it's real, right? Like there's a real thing to give my dad or my pastor an idea of like, okay, that's what he's trying to accomplish. I could see that would do that. I think you're right. So stories instead of this vague abstraction, I think is so important. And that's what I started doing more and more is I would like ask like, hey, Katie, what was your experience with this? Katie was our church secretary, right? But like she was younger and she was kind of representative of the type of people we were trying to reach. I'd be like, hey, Katie, what do you think about this idea? Same thing. And I would sometimes use her as a way to like, hey, Dad, this is what Katie thinks. And she's kind of the core of who we're trying to reach. She agrees. And he's like, okay, I get that, right? Like, so that was huge for me being able to do that. So physical, like actual examples of the people we're trying to reach, and then stories I think would be huge. That's
so good. Yeah, I agree. I remember one time we were doing this series and it was called Bold. And
dude, that series was good.
Yeah, that series was cool. And it was the first time that we had pitched to our pastor for us to actually like create our own bumper, but go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And this somewhere else was Marfa.
It's like 4 or 5 hours, 10 hours away. How far is it away?
Like 5 hours away.
5 hours away.
Yeah. But it's like, if
West
you've never
Texas.
been to Marfa, it's like in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's like the whole town's like a street.
It's like a desert.
Yeah, like a desert. But we had pitched like, man, we had like images and things like that. But also we had pitched to our pastor that it would help with our creative team to come and unify and come together. So I think that is what he was more wanting.
Yeah.
Is our creative team to be all on board to one idea and build that community within our creative team. So I think for him, when we said that, he was like, oh, let's try that. And it was like a one night stay, like at a hotel, and it wasn't expensive. We all drove down together. But I think if you ask the people that were there to this day, it's like a lasting memory that we've had. But I think it goes to show like it's how you navigate and share your perspective on the idea. And I would say the series was really successful. It was a really cool series.
I remember it probably more than any others. And I was there for maybe 10 or 12 series.
Yeah, it was like one of our best series we had done. But I think it comes down to like
I don't remember the sermons.
I mean, that's out of our control. But I think as creatives, it's like how do we speak our pastor's language and share how they would want it to be told. So stories is huge because pastors they want life change in their church.
Yeah.
So how are we going to navigate that life change with this creative project or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the last thing is really being aware that like some ideas you just don't need to push yet. So I was directing this conference. I had just been hired on. 6 months later, we did the first conference that I was in charge of. But like before that, I was starting to plan the theme for our next conference. So it was going to be a year away, but I'd only been at the company for maybe four months. And I had this really abstract idea of like so it was a creative conference for church creatives.
Okay.
And the idea was like, we were going to be exploring. So it was like this old government program of explorers, kind of have a space element. And so like our promo video for the next conference was going to be like in this like white room with like a professor explaining the explorer suit. But the dude was kind of like this goofy guy who was like constantly messing it up. And so he's like, here's your explorer suit. So this is the urine outflow tube. And then like the guy starts drinking and he's like, I said that's the urine outflow tube. And he's just like drinking it. And then eventually he gets sucked out of like in space. And so the idea was like it was a really cool, big idea concept of like that we could do a lot of cool things with the conference for, of like having explorers, you know, having a dude that was walking around you could take pictures with, and like having this kind of like, you know, imaginative ideas, right? But like I didn't do a good job pitching it. And it's funny because I kind of got fired from that job. And that was one of those things that he's like, I just didn't get your idea for that. And I'm like, man, like I should have, but I didn't build that trust. And I think so many times we go in a new place and we're like, dude, I was hired because they know I'm awesome. Mm-hmm. But just because they know you're awesome doesn't mean you have any trust yet. Right. And I did not establish that trust. And I wish I would have. It was ultimately good that I'm not working there. And I love the boss who fired me. Awesome dude. It was justified. But I just realized, man, trust is so important with all this stuff.
Once you said urine out tube, he's like, I'm out.
Dude, it was such a funny video, and like people were laughing, and like it was cool. We'd already booked the like speakers, and then they shut down the conference. Ultimately, what they did is shut down the conference. But like had the speakers booked. It was so much fun, and it would have been cool, I think. It's cool because he's like, I don't get the whole like space theme, and then like the next year, like literally all these movies came out that were space themed. I'm like, come on, man! I was like right in on it. I felt like,
man,
yeah, I felt
we'll never know
if it would have been cool or not. But
unless you know we have a Sunday social conference and that's the first theme, that would be crazy.
Saying.
This is our segue to say, I'm just kidding.
No, imagine so much work, man. Conferences are like an insane amount of work.
Yeah, but that would be crazy though.
That would be cool.
Yeah, hopefully our experiences, mostly Jonathan's stories, helped you to navigate if you have the next best idea and you're approaching your pastor or your creative leader. Here are some, practical things you can use to approach your pastor and say, hey.
There are always more ideas.
Yeah.
You don't need to die on the hill of every idea you have.
Boom. That's my final encouragement. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.